Brent, welcome back.
Thank you.
So you're getting ready to do this whole big public company thing again with your new project called ZYUS Life Sciences. Tell us a bit about that, please.
Sure. We started the company actually in April of 2018 initially under a different name, and as we went through a rebranding exercise and decided that we thought that the ZYUS would be the appropriate name given the origins of it are from the zygote, which is the beginnings of life, the cell divisions, and then us from a greater societal endeavor. And so our ambitions are really, when we step back and look at it, we're really trying to advance the science of well-being in order to make life more livable. And so in doing that, we're focused in on the phytotherapeutics. It's a category that we're talking about as plant-based medicines, essentially. And we're using cannabinoids as the basis to start that, or cannabinoid-based formulations as the basis. So to that effect, what we did is we acquired a ethanol extraction facility that can become a GMP-rated facility on scale. It'll have the ability to produce 35 million bottles of cannabis oil a year equivalent, and then be able to move into the international markets in this space as we see the next generation of products coming out in the medical field.
Okay, so starting off with, I guess, primarily CBD products in extracts?
No, I think it'll be focused on THC and CBD complement products.
So you'll be a licensed producer
Licensed producer, that's the intention.
Sure.
And in oils, capsules, and in topicals.
Okay.
Focus on those. And then we're targeting a series of countries. Our footprint is in around 20 countries that we're already speaking with. And then we're looking at about 1.1 billion people in terms of our reach.
I see. So your background is deeply scientific. You're the founder of Prairie Plant Systems, the first company in Canada really to be involved in the medical marijuana space. And that evolved into CanMed, et cetera. So I look at this initial sort of 4-pager on ZYMED, and I think, okay, well, that's got to be the starting point. I would think, given your depth and breadth of exposure to the molecular array of all cannabinoids, that is there a plan to evolve sort of FDA and Health Canada approved drugs from cannabinoids?
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to start by basically purchasing product through a series of onboarding systems and way that we can bring in product to ZYUS. That would be buying the product, de-risking a little bit to the investors, but also making it available to our patients through an onboarding process that sets the standards. And then create the products from the ethanol extraction that would be derivative based. So it would be oils, capsules, and topicals. And the idea behind that science is that we want to use the formulations to drive what their application could be. So we're trying to help change the dialogue and the paradigm in medicine a little bit. That's what our ambitions are. When we look at it, we're trying to reimagine the potential of medicine. Looking at it from a point of view of saying, the phytotherapeutics and cannabinoids in particular, when we were working with it, really have an ability to open up that dialogue because it's a complex system that requires at least 2 of the cannabinoids to be effective in this complex natural system that we have, the endocannabinoid system. So the science really has to drive the new chapters, the new opportunities, and the new revealings of how these things can be harnessed in a way that benefits us, because the suffering is still fairly strong, right? A third of every, in the United States, it's a good example, a third of all Americans are suffering from chronic pain or acute pain, a third.
Is that because of the president there?
Well, I won't go there, but the extrapolation, we have the same thing in this country. So the point is that there still is an unmet need, even in that in of itself. And with the previous company, what I learned in the process is that there's 168 conditions that our products were being prescribed for. But it's a long journey to go from when we were first assigned the project in 2000, December of 2000, and then transfer all the way through the plant sciences and the development and the Health Canada years of trying to get the product in the hands of patients and trying to work through all that stuff and trying to convince doctors that it was okay, it wasn't going to kill anybody, et cetera, et cetera. Then to moving into now, we're really starting on the onboarding to say, we see the rest of the world coming where Canada was in 2003, and which, we still see the value in this, where the cannabinoid-based formulations are going to really find their place between the analgesics such as the ibuprofens of the world and the opiates, and that's what's going to open up that dimension for us.
The understanding of exactly what conditions the various cannabinoids are indicated for are still suffer from what could best be described as an absolute dearth of clinical data in terms of the absence of research as a result of years of prohibition, et cetera. Is it still what you would consider in its infancy, the clinical research phase of cannabinoids in terms of human medicine?
Absolutely. It's in its infancy because we don't have the strong data set of any condition yet to support that. We started with clinicals when we were with the herbals and slowly moving into oils, but we're early days in understanding it. And it's not just a single drug for a single condition. It seems to be at least a complement of two cannabinoids, at least two cannabinoids working in concert in varying ratios for the condition. So it's more complex on top of it, layered on top of that, right?
Sure.
So the science has to really drive that agenda. The formulation work, we're just babies in understanding what that's going to be. So that's where I think the real opportunity is. Now, we had to sort of declare side effects, so the worst case scenario. What's the first side effect that we had to deal with? The people get a better sleep.
Yes.
So, I mean, that's still considered a side effect.
Right.
But so we're still looking at all the science pieces of this. That's really what gives rise to the opportunities. Like beyond the adult use market, we're saying, and there was a reason why it was available for human beings, and they used it for 4,000 years so far. And it has to do with managing symptoms as we get older. And I think we just have to reveal that more statistically through clinical trials and through letting science drive the agenda of what we think the formulations will be. And that's what gives rise to the opportunity and, of course, the need. And back at ZYUS, I mean, I have the team, a lot of members from the original Canamet came across, about 35 of them came across and now are with us. And we have a single-minded purpose and a culture that's committed to making it patient-centric with a patient focus, with an embracement of science to drive the agenda going forward. And we really think that that's going to be where patients are going to benefit from this in the future, and from the work. And one of the reasons why I started up again is because the mission wasn't over. We were just getting started. Right. We're just moving from the plant-based sciences to how this was now relevant to a human being. We're just getting started in that process. So I think we're early days in the scientific side.
Sure. So ZYUS at this point is a private company?
It's a privately held company. Privately held, we did a first round of financing for $25 million that we closed in October.
Okay.
And then we're looking at going into the public markets later in 2019. For what reasons? For basically so that we could have resources available for doing clinical trials, because they're expensive, and for looking at all the educational components, and for doing CapEx as we make this into a much larger company on a global scale as we start to reach out to those other markets.
Okay, so then how soon till we see ZYUS products available in Canada?
That's a good question. Actually, we have in the plant, we have a pilot plant that we're going to have completed that'll allow us to make 500,000 bottles of oil a year, completed by the end of March is our target. And so we're going to commission it in Q2 of 19. So by the end of Q2 of 19, we're hoping to have, be fully licensed and getting products into market in Canada. That's kind of our target. But the caveat, of course, is we have to go through the licensing process, which we're midway through, and it's because of the plethora of licensed applicants. It's a bit more taxing on Health Canada. So that's the only caveat. We have to make sure we're licensed.
Sure, sure. Just an interesting question that I'm sure I'm not the only one thinking this, but what have you learned from your previous incarnation with Canamed that you are taking forward into ZYUS that constitutes a different approach to doing things for the betterment of your shareholders?
I think the key thing here is on the board of directors, actually. Like our last board of directors first was too large. And as a consequence, and we had this culture of taking our time opining over things, that with too much due diligence, it took too long. Like, not that too much due diligence, but take too long to do the due diligence, to get comfortable with the situation. I think as a board, it has to move quicker in making decisions with the information to it. So a smaller board will help with that, number one. Having a board that's more proactive in helping to make sure that we get there, that we don't have, time is not our friend when we're in a publicly traded company. And then also making sure that the people that we select for there have a separate agenda. I mean, we had fund individuals or directors from other funds, and they had a separate agenda clearly than thinking of the overall benefit for the company going forward. And so we want to make sure that we have people who are aligned with our values and everything else that goes with that culture and developing it to really create the value that where it properly could be achieved and where it's fully manifested in its full regalia. That's where we want to be.
Do you see ZYUS evolving into becoming a actual cannabis grower and producer, or do you think there's sufficient supply in the system now that you'll be able to access the ingredients you need to create the compounds you're targeting?
Yeah, our target is, our goal is really to set the specifications and then to buy the product from the licensed producers. There's 3 times the amount of product available in this country, or going to be in terms of capacity, once they figure out all the different systems, to what the demand is. And so there's going to be a glut of supply. Everybody knows it's coming. And so it doesn't make sense for us to build production capacity inside of a greenhouse. It just doesn't make fiscal sense. It makes more sense for us to onboard licensed producers and train them for what we know. It took us 10 years to get good. But we can transfer that knowledge to our growers and make sure that they're actually providing products to us that meet the standards that we need in order to put it through the pipeline. So that's the first thing. The second is, I think on a global competitive basis, the field model is coming. We've seen evidences around the world where they're moving products to field and plants, and now that legislatively speaking we can go to a field model, I think we're going to start to see more pressure to move to a field model, more of a pricing pressure to move to a field model, which will be interesting because we'll then have to think about how we still maintain those same standards that protect against pesticides and protect against molds and so forth as we push this get them through the plant, through the normal process. So I think that's going to change the landscape as well. So I think from a de-risking from an investor standpoint, we're not going to be the growers. We'll be the research to help them, but we're going to mostly buy from our growers and make sure we try to help them get there.
Sure. The first wave of LPs that spent tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions, on what is categorized as ultra high-tech greenhouse, purpose-built indoor growing facilities, or a variation on that theme. The stipulation was that you're never going to be able to grow indoors or outdoors what they can grow indoors in terms of quality and yield. And now that message seems to be sort of being pushed to the background as everybody rushes to embrace this idea of growing outdoors.
Right.
And so what is the reality there? Is there a difference between what can be achieved outdoors versus indoors, or is the difference not substantial?
Well, it's an interesting question, because on a herbal basis, if you're just using dried herbal product, the answer is the indoor material definitely has a higher octane or higher THC content than compared to outdoors. And the reason behind that is because when you're growing in an outdoor environment, there's all kinds of environmental stressors. There's more so than in a greenhouse or contained design build. So the stressors cause a plant to shift its energy and resources to maintaining its own homeostasis and everything else. So it pulls away from its ability to produce cannabinoids. That's one of the reasons, a little known fact when we got started. The national average in 2003, when we were asked to start supplying patients, or 2004, after the Hitsing case in the Ontario Supreme Court decision, and all of a sudden we were thrust into making product available for patients, we learned there was a report that was done and came back from the federal government saying that the national average was 9% THC across the board. This was actually done by the RCMP, collecting data from successful convictions when they were still testing for the concentrations. Well, the highest concentration was in Quebec, which had the mostly hydroponic indoor grows. The lowest, believe it or not, was BC, which had only 7% average in the province percentage, which speaks to the fact that they were growing outside. So when you grow outside, the herbal material by itself is going to have a lower cannabinoid profile, lower THC particularly. However, when you're making derivatives and oil-based products, it's less of a concern because you're getting out the oils and you're extracting it, and you have to still bulk it up to a certain degree with olive oil or whatever you're mixing to bring it within line with the concentration. So you leverage the field grown material in through an extraction facility a lot better, right? So for the people who still prefer to vape it or smoke it, the connoisseurs are going to appreciate having indoor grown material. The people who are doing for derivatives or anything like that, it's not as critical that it come from an indoor grow. It can come from an outdoor grow.
Okay, great. Well, Brent, that's fascinating. I'm excited for you and ZYUS, and I can't wait to see what you guys come up with. We'll leave it there for now and come back to you in due course. Thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, my pleasure.